Hi, it's Kimbun. When I recorded this video, it was completely different from what you're about to hear. I was just echoing the outrage you are already hearing online, and then I realized my original video did not add anything meaningful to the conversation. So I scrapped it, and as I was sitting here around midnight on a Friday night, I asked myself, how do I really feel about the sudden death of Jane Lee, the owner of the salad chain Sumo Salad? So today I want to talk about her. I also want to talk about Yong Seh, and I want to talk about Michelle Goh. It's going to be about three stories, and it's about three lives and the many lessons for me and maybe for you too. So the first story goes a little like this. Imagine being 65 years of age, spending the last 30 years running a bak kut teh hawker store with your wife. 5 years ago, the COVID 19 pandemic struck, and during that time, times were hard. And you had more than $9,000 of store rental to cover. You had to take care of your workers, who had to take care of their families, and the salaries ran around $4,000. Meanwhile, your daily intake could be as low as $100 after working a full day. And for the next 3 years after, you ran down your personal savings and chalked up a debt of $100,000. So that was the story of Yong Seh. The second story, you are 35 years old, a talented home baker who competed in a MediaCorp baking show. Your passion lies in creating beautiful, thoughtful cakes for your customers, many of whom come to you for their most important milestones in life. You took a leap of faith and you opened a little bakery in Singapore, and you ran it with a loving husband, pouring long hours and everything you had. And eventually your business took off and you even expanded into a rojak store, a popiah store. And despite it all, you felt burned out. And you started to share your feelings openly on social media about what it's like to struggle financially, emotionally, and mentally. And that was the story of Michelle Goh. The third story, you run a humble salad store in Holland Village. Not a big franchise, just you and your staff serving fresh meals day in, day out. Then one day, your business faces a claim. A foreign worker you hired said she got injured on the job, and you're confused because you remember the incident differently and something isn't right. So you try to contest it through the Ministry of Manpower. You suspect it's part of a scam, maybe even orchestrated by the worker's spouse. So you gather evidence, you document everything. Still, nothing seems to move, and meanwhile, you suffer. So you go public. You write two posts online on Facebook exposing everything with the names, the documents, and this was your last resort. And that was the story of Jane Lee. This is 2025, yet there are countless stories just like this if you look far back enough. And the common thread across these stories is that these SME business owners left us too early. So when these stories hit the mainstream media, there is indignation on the onset, and then the next incident happens, and another. And I don't want to be yet another blogger or podcaster that milks these tragedies for clicks. I want to talk about the possible cause and effect, and whether there is more that we can do to prevent another tragedy from happening. So imagine being a hawker and $100,000 in debt due to lack of business. According to NEA, hawkers make around $2,000 to $4,000 in net income after deducting costs. So if you're a husband and wife team, you're living off that income paycheck to paycheck with little room for error. Meanwhile, your $100,000 debt stays, probably accumulating interest. So you need to find ways to make good on that. And being good, hardworking Singaporeans, you decide to work around the clock. So you leave for work at 5 a.m. every day, return home at 11 p.m. every day, and you used to rest 1 or 2 days every month. Now you're only resting 4 days during Chinese New Year every year. And if you fall sick, you continue working. And on 10th of January 2025, at age 65, you have difficulty breathing and the world turns dark. And that was the end of Yong Seh's story. Now, Mr. Ang made a choice to work 18-hour days with little rest. The question I keep asking myself is, why would anyone subject themselves to such punishment if there was another way? And I'll just tell you what his wife said, and you can come to your own conclusions. Over the years, the couple ran their stores at 5 different coffee shops in 5 different locations. Why? Because coffee shops would be sold. And when coffee shops are bought, the new owners need to get a return on investment. So the result is higher rent. And even if the coffee shops stay, when the time comes for lease renewal, the new lease comes at a higher rent. So if you told me this story last year, I would have told you that this is just capitalism at work. Market forces drive the uncompetitive out, so that capital can be maximized by extracting the maximum utility for stakeholders. Actually, you know what? Worse, for shareholders. And if you measure things only economic value, you're not wrong. Now, consider the human side. This is a couple in their 60s. They have spent half their lives in the same trade. Somehow, they managed to make things work for a good few decades. And somehow, their combined experience now is no longer competitive for the hawker trade. And hawkers are not exactly cutting edge, fast moving AI driven industry like tech, right? So maybe something else is at play here. And if that doesn't move you, how about this? This couple is in their 60s, literally spent 30 years honing one skill, cooking meals for Singaporeans at a reasonable price. We cannot logically expect them to skills future their way onto something else. So I completely understand why the only lever they thought was available was to maximize working hours. But the question I want to leave you with is, did it have to come to this? Now, imagine losing $19,000 in 6 months and losing $30,000 that you invested in your bakery. You try to manage the declining business by relocating your Toa Payoh location to a cheaper spot in Bugis. And despite the emotional, mental, and financial challenges, you keep at it. Because you want to wake up each day feeling proud of yourself and you want your parents, your kids to be proud of you too. And on 19 June 2025, at age 35, it all became too much and the world turned dark. So if you told me this story last year, I would have said you need mental fortitude to run your own business. And if you don't have it, don't do it. No one said you had to run your own business. And you know what? I was wrong. Although the story I'm about to share pales in comparison to what Michelle Goh was experiencing, it was my way of feeling what she must have felt in those moments. So when I tell people why I started YouTube, I always share that it was really something I did because someone told me I couldn't cut it as a YouTuber. So I started on 31st January this year for probably all the wrong reasons. And those of you who've been with me since the start know that things really started popping off during GE 2025. And it all started with these two videos talking about the battles for Marine Parade and Jurong. And that was 14 March, I remember. Then I started putting out videos covering the election almost every day, right up till cooling off day in May. And what many of you know is that I have zero knowledge or affinity for politics before January, literally no interest whatsoever. But I decided to use some basic number crunching that I learned from work and just spoke my mind based on what I could hear, feel, see as an average Singaporean. And I started putting together videos. But what many of you don't know though was that I had very little sleep during that period, partly because my video editing skills were so bad, but a large part was because I stayed up at night at this prata store in Hougang Green, worried that I would be found out. Not in the fraudulent kind of way, not legally, but that maybe it was all a fluke, and I really didn't know what I was talking about. That one day people will call me out and the whole thing will be over. I don't know whether it makes sense, but it's like imposter syndrome. I mean, I was just some young punk talking politics as though I knew it better than people who probably lived and breathed it for decades. So when I read what Michelle wrote about wanting to be proud of herself, that she wanted her parents and kids to be proud of her, I completely get where she was coming from. Because during that period of seemingly successful video between March and May, I lived each day wondering when the music would end, and that I would let myself down, let the people who supported me down, and that the naysayers were right, that I couldn't cut it as a YouTuber. And meanwhile, people really only see the happy side of me, or the side I allow them to see on screen. And it's like you're surrounded by a ton of people online, and yet feeling like you're the loneliest person. Of course, I don't pretend to know what Michelle felt in her moments, but I imagine there would have been some semblance to what I experienced. And of course, these days, those dark days have passed for me, and I was one of the lucky ones who got through. But I'm left wondering whether there was more that could have been done to support the mental health of business owners, podcasters, even owner operators, people who don't benefit from the HR and the support structure of big corporations, people like Michelle. Now, the situation today with Jane Lee is still unfolding. The facts are still being looked at by MOM and the police. And if wrongdoing is found by the worker, by the law firms, or anyone else, there must be accountability. We must also look at the systems involved. How long does it take to go from complaint to resolution? What support is available when you're caught in limbo? But maybe the real question is this. Can we go beyond outrage and actually fix something permanently? If Jane Lee's situation echoes the business pressures that Yong Seh faced, or the emotional toll that Michelle carried, then surely it's time for our policymakers to discuss this in Parliament of what more can be done to support SME owners in Singapore. So I realize this episode is heavy, but it has to be, because if we keep moving on and only fixing the leaks as they happen, then we're just waiting for the next tragedy and the next name, and we need to do better. Yeah, so that's all I have to say for today, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.